The Ukrainian military has once again launched its largest-scale air raid on the Russian capital, Moscow. Fires have been seen breaking out in various parts of Moscow, and loud explosions are being heard throughout the city. Let's take a closer look at this situation today. Let's watch right away. On June 18th, the Ukrainian military launched a massive drone airstrike on the Russian capital, Moscow, which is being considered the largest since the start of the war. This attack was on a completely different scale compared to previous operations that targeted Russian border areas or rear military bases. Some believe the war is shifting again, as this attack directly targeted Moscow, Russia's political and economic center. Among the facilities that were attacked, the one that drew the most attention was a large oil refinery located in the southeastern part of Moscow. This facility, just 16 kilometers from the Kremlin, played a key role in the Moscow region's energy supply. This oil refinery has the capacity to process more than 12 million tons of crude oil annually and is known as a key facility that supplies a significant amount of the fuel consumed in the Moscow region. After the attack, a huge fire erupted at the site, sending black smoke several kilometers into the sky. The airstrike's aftermath extended beyond the refinery facility. Moscow region's transportation network became chaotic. Flight restrictions were imposed at major capital region airports, including Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, and Zhukovsky, causing hundreds of flight cancellations and delays. As the air transportation system of Russia's largest city was shaken, citizens' anxiety grew, in particular as international passengers and transfer passengers were stranded at airports for long periods. Social unrest expanded. Damage also continued in civilian areas. At Sadovad, a large Moscow shopping center, facilities were damaged by falling drone debris, with additional damage reported at nearby commercial and residential areas. Some high-rise residents were evacuated, and many people, including children, were reportedly injured. There are also opinions that this incident made Russian citizens realize that the war is no longer just a distant story. The Russian military announced that its air defense system shot down 555 Ukrainian drones. It stated that about 200 of them were approaching Moscow. This revealed a scale far exceeding previous records, with the Russian state-run TASS news agency calling it the largest attack on Moscow in the past 2 years. There was a record air raid recently, but this one has already surpassed it. Also, the fact that major facilities were hit despite Russia deploying massive air defense forces to protect the capital is causing quite a shock. In this situation, President Zelensky has publicly shown a very strong stance. He stated that as long as Russia continues the war, Ukraine will not lower its level of response. He went on to warn that if Ukraine burns, Moscow will burn as well. This statement is being interpreted as a message that attacks on Russian territory may continue in the future. With Ukraine rapidly expanding its long-range drone capabilities, attacks on major Russian cities and energy facilities are likely to become more frequent. These attacks aren't isolated incidents, they're spreading increasingly widely. Recently, the Ukrainian military has repeatedly struck Russian oil refineries, fuel storage sites, munitions factories, and railways, with the impact now becoming evident inside Russia. Currently, in 53 regions of mainland Russia, as well as in Crimea and parts of Donbass, restrictions on fuel sales to private vehicles are being enforced. Russian authorities say these are preventive steps to stabilize supply, but local concerns about fuel shortages are rising. In fact, Russia's major oil company Partneft began restricting the sale of gasoline and diesel at major gas stations nationwide starting June 16th. Passenger car drivers can now purchase up to 30 liters of gasoline at a time, and diesel is being sold up to a maximum of 60 liters. Trucks were affected too. Logistics vehicles are now limited to 300 liters of diesel per transaction, a rare measure under normal conditions. Russia is one of the world's largest energy producers. The very fact that a country like that is implementing fuel sales restrictions is drawing a lot of attention. Repeated attacks on oil refineries and facility shutdowns are putting more strain on fuel production and logistics systems. The international community's focus is shifting. Russia also continues daily drone and missile strikes across Ukraine. Recently, media headlines have focused not on Russia's attacks, but on Moscow and the Russian mainland being struck. Until now, Ukraine has mainly borne the brunt of the war's damage, but now the effects of the war are starting to visibly appear inside Russia as well. As a result, more attention is turning to Russia's internal situation to track the war's direction. Given the timing of the attack, it hardly seems coincidental. Recently, Ukraine has been choosing the timing of its attacks not only on Russian military facilities, but also by taking into account diplomatic events and major international dates. At the time of this airstrike, President Putin was attending the Russia-ASEAN summit held in Kazan, Western Russia. For Russia, it was an important diplomatic stage meant to show that its strategy of isolating the country from all sides has failed, and that it is still actively cooperating with the international community. But at that very time, the capital Moscow came under a large-scale drone attack, and the attention of the international community turned not to the summit, but to the skies over Moscow. This is not the first time such a move has happened. On June 3rd, the Russian side was attacked in the region during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is Russia's largest economic event. This forum is a key event where Russia showcases its economic strength to foreign investors and allies. It appears that Ukraine is choosing a strategy of highlighting instability within Russia whenever such international events are held. Whenever Russia projects safety and confidence, Ukraine creates a contrasting image. Also, the G7 summit held just before the attack was significant. At the summit, G7 countries again agreed on the need to keep pressure on Russia. In particular, President Trump, who had previously shown a cautious attitude toward the Russia issue, publicly mentioned the possibility of additional sanctions, which started to change the atmosphere. For Ukraine, this suggests that Western Bloc political support will strengthen again. With the UK and Germany planning to expand air defense support and military support, Ukraine has gained diplomatic confidence. In this case, the large-scale attack on Moscow is both a military operation and a political statement. At the same time as demonstrating the capability to strike deep into Russian territory, it is also intended to show the international community that Russia can no longer maintain a safe rear area. This attack is significant not only for its large scale and use of hundreds of drones, but also for its coordination with diplomatic and military strategies. Additionally, European military support keeps growing. The British government will use profits from frozen Russian assets for a new support package. This support is estimated at $1 billion, or about 1.5 trillion won. The UK plans to supply 150,000 drones to Ukraine and will also provide air defense missiles and about 350 ground-based radar systems. Since Ukraine recently suffered major damage from Russian drone and missile attacks, boosting its air defense is now the top priority. The UK has stated that through this support, it aims to strengthen both Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities and its defensive abilities at the same time. Also, in the case of Hungary, after Viktor Orbán, the former Hungarian prime minister who had consistently voiced opposition in the EU, stepped down, Hungary has also begun to open up to supporting Ukraine. Hungary quickly dropped its veto on starting Ukraine's EU accession talks and began cooperating with sanctions it had previously blocked. Europe's support for Ukraine has officially started. As a result, Ukraine is expected to launch more offensives in the future. But there's an important point to note here as well. The question is whether Russia can simply let this attack slide. From the Kremlin's perspective, scenes of Moscow being repeatedly attacked are bound to be a significant burden. If key infrastructure near the capital is hit and airport operations are disrupted, concerns are rising that Russia may respond even more aggressively. Recently, the Russian military has continued large-scale drone and missile attacks across Ukraine. However, there are predictions that the intensity of the attacks could increase even further in the future. First of all, Ukraine's power facilities are being mentioned as major targets. If power plants, substations, and transmission facilities are attacked further, major cities in Ukraine could face significant difficulties in power supply. This could disrupt industrial production and impact munitions factory operations. Another target is the railway network, as much of the Ukrainian military's ammunition and equipment is transported to the front lines by rail. If Russia targets railway depots, rail junctions, and major logistics hubs, it could further strain Ukrainian troop movement and supply lines. In particular, since a significant portion of weapons and ammunition supplied from the West are also being transported using the railway network, Russia considers the railway network to be a target of high strategic value. The main bridges over the Dnipro River are also drawing attention. The Dnipro River is a key waterway that divides Ukraine into east and west. If the main bridges are destroyed or unusable for long, troop and supply movements could slow significantly. There are also concerns that Russia may focus on targeting this transportation infrastructure to gain an advantage on the front lines. So far, both sides appear to be continuously escalating the intensity of their attacks. Depending on what form of retaliation Russia chooses after the Moscow airstrike, the level of tension in the war could rise even further. Some analysts say this could be a crucial turning point in the coming weeks, with both an attack on the capital and large-scale retaliation being discussed.